Hi, I'm Terry Geo, and you are watching Season 10 of the Writing Community Chat Show. I would love you to check out the Kickstarter campaign for Blink and You'll Miss It, which debuted at the Edinburgh Fringe this year. With your help and support, we can get it back on the stage next year. Simply Google Kickstarter, Blink and You'll Miss It, to grab yourself some goodies and see this year's performance. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community. We invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hi, my name is Chris, and you're watching the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm here, Chris, and with me is Chris Hooley. How are you doing, Chris?
Hello. Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you. How are you, Chris?
I'm good. Guys, tonight, coming up on tonight's show, we've got fantastic Stephen J. Goals coming from Japan, which is definitely our furthest distance show. And apparently it's 5 a.m. in the morning where he is. So I hope he's got a very strong coffee on the go, which is pretty mad because it is Friday evening for us, which means the weekend is here. And unless you've lived under a rock, you may have noticed that Elon Musk has recently bought Twitter. And you may notice that it's trending RIP Twitter at the moment. But don't worry, it's still kind of here and we're still kicking around on Twitter. So please don't disappear off there just yet, because that's where most of our community is. And it's been quite hilarious where people have decided to hijack the new feature, which is buying a verification tick. And I don't know who would do that. Of course, they have done some crazy, funny things, replicating actual industries and people, celebrities. Even the Pope was replicated and tweeted very strange things from their accounts. For example, Coke Pepsi had tweeted, not official Pepsi, but account looked just like Pepsi with a verification mark. Coke is better, which is quite funny. And we also had, which one's this? This is Nestle saying, we steal your water and sell it back to you, because obviously they are coffee. So there's some really good examples of that online. Some I can't show on the screen because they're too, risky. But there you go. So people taking advantage of Twitter, and it is still there. But yeah, Chris, hello, welcome. Friday. It's great to be back on the show with you. Season 10, second episode. How's it going?
Yeah, season 10, and what a great second episode and the second guest that we've got. We've had Will Carver, episode 1, at the start of season 10, which obviously he's amazing. His books are brilliant as well. And today on the show, we've got my favorite poet that is living today. He's absolutely brilliant. He's also a fantastic crime author as well. So, really looking forward to getting to chat to him and pick his brains. And he's an editor. So he's just a man of many, many talents. And, he's coming all the way from Japan at 5 o'clock in the morning now. That is commitment. Yeah. If any of our guests have deserved an extra boost, then Steve and Jay Golds is definitely one of them.
I quite like the fact that he's an editor, and the video you promoted for him had a spelling error in it.
Don't even go. I was mortified. I did it. I was really busy, but I did it in a sort of like lunch break, and I put it up, and I thought, yeah, I like that. It's good. I've got the Japan element in there. And then when I came back, I looked at it again. I was like, no, how have I done that? But nobody noticed. And I, being the sort of paranoid person that I am, I thought I'm going to mention it before somebody else does and sort of ribs me about it. So I put a new video up and then had a little bit of a dialogue with Ross Young about how response nibble.
Yeah.
Sounds better if you put it in a French accent. Response nibble.
Yes, I like that.
And it sounds quite sexual. Response nibble. So yeah, that was my Friday afternoon. So, yeah.
Hello to everybody in the chat. Great to have you on. And thank you guys for listening on the podcast. Actually, we climbed the ranks on good pods last week, and we got up in the top 15 or so of the book charts there. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you so much and keep doing so. Hopefully we can get the top 10. Everyone in the chat, hello to you. Leah says, I'm late. I was setting some content out for myself. Is this the second week, right? It is. It is the second week. It's been a strange week for most people's brains, so you're not alone there. Yeah, it's the second show of season 10. Last week was a blast. If you want to go and check that out with Will Carver, you can do so on all the platforms, of course. But
a spelling error there for Linda would have been great. It's been a crazy week for my Brian. That's one that always crops up.
Yeah, you've got spelling on the mind there, Chris.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a heads up. Our guest is coming from Japan, as we mentioned. It's a long distance show, so we might have some issues with sound in there. If we do so, we will try and tidy it up as best we can. But please bear with us. Yeah. Also, we want to have a little look at the books, don't we, Chris? The Chris versus Chris challenge.
Yes, we do. I've tried to come back with a vengeance this week. I've tried to give the people what they want. Not necessarily give Brandon what he wants, because I didn't consult him this time, but I tried to give the people what they want.
Well, he has got 2 changes he's not aware of, at least. So let me all show you what we did last week for Brandon's books. These were voted on social media, which, if you'll see on your screen right now, there are 4 covers we did for Brandon. And if you look in the middle, this was his original cover. And these 4 books were designed by myself and Chris for Brandon for one of our new features. And this was put out on Twitter, and people were voting very well, in my opinion, for those books, who they thought was the favorite.
Yeah, I mean, they were voting. But Brandon made a great point on the Tuesday episode that we didn't give him any context. This is a novel set in Chicago about rising gods that are brand new and they're coming into the fold. So I feel like that's important to mention this time around.
Well, of course, but let me show everybody the books that are for the second book. It's not normally a 2-book deal with this feature, but he wants to do both of his books, so we have kindly done that for him. The second set of books has, I think, upped their game. And just remember they're in relation to the first. So as you saw those covers in the first, the second are in comparison to those. So here you go. As you can see,
in fact, you sabotaged me again.
I have not done that, Chris.
You sabotaged me. No one can see.
There you go. There you go. Right. So in relation to the first, the Fiery Ring, this is book 2 of that, and this is Brandon's original cover. The tree cover was then this, and time has reference to the books. Thank you, Chris. And your skyscraping kind of cover was this one, the second, and the Viking in the first, followed by this in the second. So please let us know what you think in the comments. Opinions, please. And if you did vote, thank you for doing so. And this will go up on social media to be voted on as well. So what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all great. What was really eye-opening last week was just how different all the covers were and just how different the response was. Like on Twitter, there were so many people talking about different, the different ones and which ones they preferred. And, I think it speaks volumes in terms of you don't really know what people want. Like when you're going through this sort of process, like all of our ideas are very, very different, but equally eye-catching. So I think it does spell the importance of a good cover. It's like, if you've got a good cover, chances are you're going to get a good reader. And we've got an author on tonight, obviously, who's got fantastic covers. He is the master of covers. Or maybe not him. Maybe he does do them himself. He does everything else. But yeah, whoever designed Steve's covers, they are some of the best covers I've ever seen. So yeah, good cover.
And that is open to all of you to access. And in fact, you saw Terry open the show again today. He had a double rollover because no one else took up that feature. So if you want to have the show introduced, if you're a podcaster, if you're in a band, if you've got books, if you want to promote your TikTok account, jump on there, introduce us, and we can sort that out. And there's a book promotion section in the middle as well. So get on that.
We draw the line at OnlyFans. That's probably
why not?
Else is fine. I mean,
I'm all game for that as long as you cover the bits and we can play it. Go for it. Cover it with books. That's all you need to do.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. The show finally gets kicked off the air.
Brandon might do that. He might be up for that. He's been posting the pictures of himself losing weight. So
yeah. The show finally gets kicked off after all that time for someone having an introduction OnlyFans. Oh dear me.
Yeah.
So, Chris, shall we get our guest on tonight?
We should definitely do that because, as I said before, he's a man of many talents. He is my favorite poet. Like, there's nobody's poetry that I've read that I've connected with in the same way, and that speaks volumes. Because for me, I'm not into poetry really. Like, I like Shakespeare and Keats and people like that, but on the whole, I'm not into poetry. But when I read Steve's poetry, it was game changing.
Yeah.
And really opened my eyes. And his novels are brilliant as well. He's a great crime writer, really gritty crime, violent crime, set in in Asia in parts as well, which is brilliant. He's got some brilliant characterization as well. And I am aware that he's disappeared. So
I thought you were stalling pretty well there, Chris, because I was looking at
I was running out of words there, but
no, he is here promoting his latest release, which is Half Empty Doorways and Other Injuries. It was released in August this year, and he has reappeared. So let's get him on the show. He's actually give him a minute because he's plugging in some earphones there.
I will give him a minute because I've got another thing to say. He's also produced a crime anthology recently. He has edited a crime anthology, and it has 30 of the best crime writers around. And he's put it all together. It's his passion project. It's his labor of love, and it's going to be brilliant. And I think it's due to come out very soon as well. So keep an eye out for the Gone anthology.
Yeah, there was a fantastic review left on this latest book about someone who's not a poetry reader stepping into the world of poetry because of Stephen. So I'm excited to talk about that. But ladies and gentlemen, like I said, he's here promoting his latest book, Half Empty Doorways and Other Injuries, which was out in August. So let's introduce him to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen J. Golds. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, gentlemen. Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And I'm very excited to say your earphones have solved the problem with the audio. So wicked.
I thought they would.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone, please, in the comments, show some love for Stephen being here because it's 5 a.m. where he is right now, or maybe 1:15. And that's, I don't think we've ever had someone come on the show so early. So thank you so much for joining us, Steve.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I don't think I've ever got up this early unless I was traveling abroad. I feel like I'm going to the airport soon or something like that.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
So, Steve, I don't know if you heard before you put your headphones in, but I said that you are my favorite poet.
Thank you.
So, yeah, told people that. I said, normally I'm not a massive poetry fan, but reading your poetry, something definitely clicked and spoke to me on a very deep level. Actually, some of the poems that I was reading, I was like, is this about my life? Has Steve been watching me from a distance?
That'd be weird.
Yeah, exactly. But I suppose we're going to have to, if we start with the poetry, if that's all right. Then because
that's where I started. Yeah,
brilliant. Because I said to all the listeners and people watching now that you're a poet, you're an author, and you're an editor. So we've got so many things to cover over the next sort of 40 minutes or so. So if you tell us just a little bit about poetry and how you got into it and your process around poetry as well.
My origin story for poetry is really not cool. When I was in high school, I liked hip hop music a lot, like Notorious B.I.G., Tupac Shakur, Nas. So I wanted to be a rapper, and of course I couldn't rap, but I enjoyed writing the lyrics. And then basically the poetry that I write now is very different to what, I wrote when I was in high school. But then through rap music, I found like kind of the indie scene, like the Libertines, Pete Doherty, and Nirvana, Kurt Cobain. And I found their kind of lyrics, and then I started writing songs. And of course, I couldn't be a musician because I couldn't sing and I couldn't play any instruments. So I started writing poetry. And then I started sending stuff away to the small press, or the indie scene, kind of what we have now. And I got a couple of things published, poetry, and then from there I started writing short stories. And then I moved to Asia, and I gave up writing for like 15 years. And then I actually restarted. I went through like maybe about 5 years ago, I went through like a really tough time here in Japan, like a mentally tough time. So through that, I started writing poetry again as a form of therapy. So I always recommend to everyone, write poetry if you're having some kind of mental problem. It really helps. It's like therapy. It's like counseling. But also, if you write poetry, the whole point is to write something really evocative, something very emotive in the shortest amount of words possible. And then if you can transfer that to write in short stories, and then you take what you learn there onto writing, the longer prose and novels, then you find that you'll be a snappier writer. So I think, poetry should be tried by everyone.
So say somebody's listening now and they're thinking, do you know what? I'm going to take Steve's advice. I'm going to try writing poetry. What would your advice to them be in terms of how to start? Because some people would have no idea how to write a poem.
My advice is don't think about it. The problem is too many people go, we studied poetry in school, right? Like Keats. And of course, Keats is great, but unfortunately, because we were forced to study it in school, it ripped the soul out of it. It ripped the love out of it. So don't think about any poetry that you've read before, and just try to write four sentences, with a killer hook, a killer ending on the fifth sentence. Just try that. And then use it as a writing exercise. And you can write about whatever you want, but, make it honest and make it, make the final line really, be a gut punch, I think.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this book now, like that, and I just want you to expand on some of the poems that are in it.
Sure.
Some of my favorites that I picked up. The best ones are the crazy ones. Love Hotel in my hometown, and What We Talk About When We Talk About Anything. So there's just 3 poems that I picked out as some of my favorites in that book. I was just wondering if you could tell us sort of like how those poems came about and sort of like what you were feeling at the time when you wrote them, if possible.
They're all the thing is with the short stories or with the novels, that's all. I'm having fun. I'm creating characters and I'm creating stories. It's fun. But with the poetry, it's almost like a diary or a journal. So I think, like everyone, I've had my fair share of bad relationships, or things that didn't work out, or things that went wrong. So I kind of just took what I was feeling at the time, and I knocked it out. So, for example, the poetries that you're reading, they haven't been redrafted. I write one time, I edit it, and then it's done. Boom, it's finished. My own personal belief is if you try to edit a poem too much, you kind of rip the soul away from it. I like poetry to be really raw, and hopefully, if you write it in a raw way like that, it'll. Even though my poetry is all personal, a lot of it's I. But like you said, a lot of people can relate to it because I'm writing about relatable things.
Yeah. So if we just move slightly from poetry into short stories, because some of your short stories have been, again, some brilliant ones. There's one that really stands out to me that I can remember. I was sort of midway through my master's degree and I was on a train, and you posted this short story, and I'll always remember it because the main character in it, he comes down the stairs and his wife is trying to feed their baby shit, like actual human shit. So, I mean, it's
That makes me sound really awful.
So honestly, if you're listening to it now, we'll try and put a link or something below because it's a brilliant story and it's almost like a social commentary as well.
It is. That was my first attempt at writing satire.
Right, brilliant. So again, that's why I was going to ask, like, why did you write that, and how did that come about, and what's your favorite type of short story to write?
It's always funny with short stories and with poetry because people always tell me, "Oh, Steve, my favorite of yours is this one," or "My favorite of yours is this one." Yeah, and it's always different to what my favorites are.
Yeah.
Which I think is great, that I can write something as satire and it can, even though I don't think too much about it, once it's out in the world, it can really attach itself to people, which is what I love about writing. But that actual story is called The Shit Eaters. Sorry about that. Yeah, am I allowed to?
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Chris swore first. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm old school gentleman. I think it's rude to, maybe curse in front of people who don't want to hear it. But then you read my books or my short stories like The Shit Eaters, which is doesn't transfer into my literature. But I feel that we're living in one of the most or the most vapid period in history. I collect vinyl. I'm a big vinyl fan, and it really kind of disappoints me that the period that we're living in now is the music is not great, the art's not great, and then you get what people appreciate isn't what what I feel they should be appreciating. For example, a couple of years ago or a year ago, when I was writing that story, here in Japan, really popular YouTubers were people who just ate food in front of a mic. I don't know if have you ever seen that?
Is it is it for the sound?
Yeah, for the sound.
Yeah, AMSR, is it? Yeah, I think so.
I got no idea, but my students will show me and I'm like, what the hell is this? Why are you watching this? My daughter's watching TikTok and I'm like, it just feels so vapid. So with The Shit Eaters, of course, the shit is symbolic of this kind of vapid culture that I feel personally that we're living in.
I agree. What's really kind of my bugbear of this entire year is the fact that everything we're consuming in Britain at the moment, whether it's through TV, majority of TV, and most definitely 60% of music that's on popular radio at the moment is regurgitated music from our era or before. And there doesn't seem to be anything coming out original, and it's really kind of getting to me now.
It's the same with movies. A lot of the movies nowadays are remakes or reboots, and it's like, if you go to the indie scene, there's so much talent there for writers. And why on earth are Hollywood just regurgitating the same stuff over and over? Even with rap, if you look at rap music, a lot of it is when you think about the poetry that you got from Tupac Shakur compared to, what we're getting now is, it's completely night and day. So, I know every generation says this, right? My father said it about my generation, and then my grandfather said it about my father's generation. But I just feel like we're kind of being brainwashed. I feel like to be more than ever just mindless consumers. I feel like kind of we're losing our souls a little bit. I feel.
Yeah. It's really strange when you've got the TikTok sensation at the moment and things like that, where people are literally, they're sat and they're getting addicted to almost and watching video after video after video after video, and there's not much else going on in their lives other than work. They come home distressed, watch telly, then look at the videos, and suddenly there's not much production for themselves anymore. If that makes sense. It's all for the bigger industry, and it's all for the consuming, but it's not really for them. So they are becoming sort of bubble wrapped by this world now.
And also, like the thief of time is I'm not on any social media except for Twitter because of that. Because, of course, YouTube as well. But before I joined Twitter, I had written my novel Always the Dead, and I was halfway through Say Goodbye When I'm Gone, my second novel, or the first one that was released. And then I realized, I don't know anyone that writes. I don't know anyone that reads. I really, really want to meet other people who are like me, who are writing, who are reading. So I joined Twitter, and of course I love Twitter so much. It's given me so much, but my productivity since joining Twitter has decreased, I think, by about 50% or something.
Wow.
So,
it's quite impressive because normally on the show, someone comes on the show, I can research them pretty well. It's quite hard to research you, Steve, because you're not on social platforms.
No. I'm kind of a Luddite, to be honest. I don't, as you could tell when I logged in today, I don't really know how to use technology. I'm not really a fan of technology, really. It's the same like Instagram, right? Instagram, I don't want to see what some kid or someone who I went to school with, I don't want to see a photograph of the sandwich that they ate for lunch. It's just not for me. So,
talking about sandwiches, then, how long have you lived in Japan for, Steve?
Where's the relation? Sandwiches?
I'll get there. Come on. How long have you lived in Japan for?
About 15 years now. Yeah.
So you're very obviously you grew up in UK enough to know a lot about UK food. So is there something that you desperately miss from the UK kind of food industry?
Yes. Ginster's Cornish pasties.
Yes.
Do you still have them? Ginster's Cornish pasties, and of course Scotch eggs. And Yorkie bars as well. Yorkie bars, I miss those like crazy.
Yeah, they're a lot smaller now. 15 years has gone by, like they're literally like.
That's I imagine everything's got smaller but more expensive.
Oh yes,
yeah, definitely. So Steve, like obviously Chris was saying about trying to find information about you, it's quite difficult. But in some respects, I like to think of you as like, I think I'm cool now by association, having found you as a writer, because I can say, "Oh, have you seen Stephen Jay Gould? Have you read his book?" And then I can recommend it. And then when somebody else loves it, they think I'm cool for association through you. So thank you for that.
I'm trying to be like a cool indie garage band, that just gets around by word of mouth. Yeah,
that's the best way to get around. But I mean, you've got the full package. Your covers are amazing. I was saying again, I don't know if you heard this when we were introducing you, but your cover art is I don't know who does it or if you could shed a light on it, but it's some of the best work that I've seen. It stands out. It's completely different, but it's also brilliant as well at the same time.
Yeah. So my novels are done by Red Dog, by Sean at Red Dog Press, and then the poetry book Half Open Doorways and Other Injuries is done by Cody Sexton, and he has like a separate press to Outcast Press.
So how did you make? Obviously, you got the covers and everything, but obviously you talked about the poetry and the short stories. When did you decide to make that transition then into writing novels? And when you did, why did you choose to write crime or writing noir crime?
Okay, so basically, I feel like if you're a writer, you're a writer. You've always been a writer, maybe. So for those maybe 15, 16 years that I never wrote anything. I used to work customs in the airport, actually in Luton Airport I used to work. And I was reading All Quiet on the Western Front, actually, at work, while working once. And at the same time, we had like a tuberculosis scare at the airport. There was some people who came through us that we dealt with that found out that they had tuberculosis, and we had searched their stuff. So of course that was quite shocking at the time, or it stuck in my head. So I had an idea at the time of writing a World War I novel about a soldier with tuberculosis, and then I kept that in my head, and it was in my head the whole time. And then I read the true story of Jean Spangler, who was a beautiful woman who lived in Hollywood in the 40s and who mysteriously disappeared one day. So I had this tuberculosis soldier meets the 1940s starlet story mixed together, and then I kept that in my head. It became like a movie in my head, and then I wrote Always the Dead in, like, when I started writing, I was like, oh, I've got to get this out now. And then I think I wrote that in about a month and a half. And then once that was done, the characters from Always the Dead, they stayed with me, and then they started, a completely different story themselves in Say Goodbye When I'm Gone. And then another character from Always the Dead, the first book, he was also constantly in my mind. So that became the prequel book that I wrote last, which is I'll Pray When I'm Dying.
Yeah. So with obviously your books, the opening of Say Goodbye When I'm Gone is one of the most brutal openings I've ever read, in terms of just the emotion, the raw emotion that's there. Do you set out to sort of like create that really big hook at the beginning, or is that just something that the idea was there and you went with that?
Basically, the idea was kind of already there. I had the idea for a scene already in my head. I'm sure everyone listening is a writer, right? And you guys are writers, so in your daily life, you'll get an idea pop into your head, and you're like, I can't use that at the moment, but I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to grow that idea. Maybe I get like 10 or 20 a day that I try to scribble down, and then that was an idea that I originally had. And then quite a lot of my novels as well have been dreams. I don't know if that sounds strange, but sometimes I have some crazy dreams, and then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll write that down. And I'm like, wow, that's a really good idea for a novel.
I wish I could do that. That sounds amazing.
So yeah, I just get ideas from everywhere. And then Say Goodbye When I'm Gone is actually a love story for or it's a love story, but for fathers and daughters. At the time I was going through a divorce, and I only live like 5 minutes down the street, so I went through a divorce, and then for me, if I don't have my kids, then there's no point for me being alive. So I moved just 5 minutes, so we see each other every day, and they're over here most nights. But Say Goodbye When I'm Gone is a love story, father for daughter. And then Always the Dead is the bad romance story. And then the third book in the trilogy, I'll Pray When I'm Dying, is like a story of father and sons when, the father doesn't want to become the son doesn't want to become the father, if you know what I mean. But we do, right? Yeah. The sons become their fathers in the end.
By the sounds of it there, Steve, you've taken what is essentially your biggest fear and then just looked it straight in the face and gone, I'm going to write a story about that.
Well, I think, for example, maybe my dad's watching. Hi, Dad. But of course, that's not my biggest fear. But I think, as sons or as daughters, we always we always try to be better than our parents, right? Or we're trying to. Even this generation is quite difficult. But it's the same. I heard it saying like, if your children don't surpass what you've done, then you failed as a parent. So I think I try to write about the stuff that's really important for me, relationships basically. I wouldn't say that I was a crime writer. I never intended to be a crime writer. It just kind of happened. So those were the stories that coincidentally I told, but I never thought, right, I'm going to be a crime writer.
Yeah. I love that. Chris is muting himself.
I have done that. I've got a review I'd like to read about your book, or your current book anyway. And it's quite a long review, but I'll read it out. It's a fantastic 5-star review, as is every review on Amazon for that book, by the way. It says, another great collection of poetry from Stephen J. Goals, which just fills that void nicely till his next book is published. So firstly, I like that the fact there's a gap there and you filled it with poetry. I've got to admit that when I discovered contemporary poetry through this writing, and I'm no expert on the subject, I do know what I like, and I like Steve Goals' writing a lot. At the risk of offending him, I would say that his collection is less bloody and violent, but no less raw for all that. I wouldn't say he is mellowing, but maybe just maturing. I love the way that he can tell a story which is full of raw emotion in just a few short lines or prose. So firstly, like I mentioned, it's great that that fills the gap between novels being released for authors that really support your work. Like Chris mentioned earlier, he hadn't really discovered poetry before reading your poetry, and that's the same for other readers of yours as well. So that's, I think, a fantastic thing to do. But what I'd like to know is, off the back of the comment there, that they love the way that you can tell a story which is full of raw emotion in just a few short lines of prose. Is that something you're aware of? And if you can give any tips to someone who wants to write short, impactful kind of ways, what can they do, and kind of what advice have you got?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's something I actively try to do is, when I'm writing prose, I try to make it as poetic and as snappy as possible. And when I'm writing poetry, I try to make it as straightforward and snappy as possible. So it's an opposite kind of situation. But I feel like no one wants to have a conversation like I'm doing now, where someone is kind of blah, 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 blah. They're kind of drawling on. It's the same with writing. You really need to keep it snappy and punchy. When I'm writing anything, I like to think of it in the sense of either two ways. Like boxing, you got combos, and then think of your sentence as a combo in boxing style. Or if you don't want to think of it like that, think of it as a tune, a beat, a tempo, and a cadence. That's what you really should be aiming for, some kind of musical cadence in what you're writing.
Fantastic.
So Steve, your novels remind me of sort of like a mixture of Elmore Leonard with his style and that sort of like punchy vibe to it, and you never get bored of the characters. There's never, your chapters are very visual as well. It's like almost like watching a film in parts. Like you can see everything, but you're not like a John Steinbeck where you go into so much detail, but you've just got enough there so you can picture it. So Elmore Leonard mixed with Tarantino. That's what I would say. Your work kind of reads like.
I've actually never read Leonard.
Have you not?
No, so I need to start reading him.
Yeah, I mean, just pick up one of his books, and they're very similar to yours in terms of like, you've got that punchiness of the sentences, but also the characters are not afraid to go to places where, people wouldn't necessarily go, in terms of what happens to the characters, what they experience. There's violence in your books, obviously, really dark, emotional plot lines as well. So So yeah, I suppose when you're writing, where are you going? Sort of like you've said about that, you suffered. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe with depression at some point. And if you're writing, how do you write that type of thing and stay in control of it and not let it consume you in that respect? So you're writing violent scenes and dark scenes, and some people will be like, I need to get out of this and go and do something else. Like, how do you manage that?
That's what my mum says. She says, why is it always so dark? But I think life is beautiful, but there's also a lot of brutality, right? So I think if you're going to be realistic, you have to write life as it is, and of course life is beautiful, but it's also brutal. So you've got to deal with it equally, I think. But I always say this, when I first started writing, I honestly asked myself the question, am I going to be 100% truthful? Am I going to be 100% honest? Because if I'm not going to be 100% honest, I don't want to bother doing it. Or I shouldn't bother doing it. So I try to be as honest as possible in everything that I write. If it's poetry and I'm writing about myself, I'm 100% honest.
Yeah.
If I'm writing a character in a novel, I'm going to write it 100% honest to that time period or to that kind of character that they are. I think everyone should really try to do that as much as possible. Like, screw it, I'm going to be 100% honest. Yeah. And I don't care. Like, some of the poetry is maybe considered, I wouldn't want my kids to read any of my stuff because it is kind of too honest. But that's what I have to, if I want to be a writer, unfortunately, that's what I have to do. I have to force myself to put myself out there, to be vulnerable, because I think the readers know that and they can tell that.
Yeah. Have you got any tips for anyone who is looking to represent other cultures in their fiction? Because obviously you do that, but some people might not be brave enough to do that. So yeah, what sort of advice and tips have you got for somebody who's looking to do that?
So other cultures. So one of the characters in Say Goodbye When I'm Gone is a Japanese girl, and ordinarily I never would have written that, but I feel I've lived in Japan almost as long as I lived in England. I feel that I know what I'm talking about. I've been here long enough. I've immersed myself in the culture quite heavily. So I felt that I could write about that. I think it's probably not best to write about something if you don't really, or a culture if you don't really know about it, unless you dedicate yourself to, doing the research. So I think if you do want to write about something that you don't know in your daily life, then research it. Of course, I'm not a criminal, but I write crime. But of course, I'm, I research as heavily as I can.
Steve, so this is a slightly wayward question, but it's still on the topic of writing and promotion in Japan. Before the Coffee Gets Cold was huge in it. That was coincidental. That's actually the title of the book that I'm talking about.
Oh, right. You drank that at the right time as well.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Perfect timing. No, Before the Coffee Gets Cold it was huge in Asia, and then it came over to Europe for a translated version. So has anyone ever discussed with you about translating your books into Japanese? And would that be something that you'd be looking at doing?
I think, I would be interested. I've had 2 people discuss it with me. but it's not. The translation is I could do myself. It would take time, you know. My Japanese is maybe I sound a bit like Borat when I speak Japanese.
You've got to give us a taste, Steve. Come on.
No, I won't. But it sounds so bad. But I think definitely it would be something that I'd be interested in, but it'd just be the case of going through the whole rigmarole of publication, getting it published, getting a publishing deal here in Japan.
Yeah.
Like my daily conversation is great. I'm fluent having daily conversations, but you know, and once for example, I had to go to the hospital recently, and once you get away from, you know, stuff that you've studied or stuff that you've actually spoken about before, once you're talking about kind of heavy scientific stuff or legal stuff, it's, you know, forget about it. But it would definitely be something that I'm definitely interested in doing.
Yeah. So we're going to go on to the community questions in a short space of time, but you're also an editor, and you've put together what I described as a labor of love at the start of the show. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the Gone anthology and how that came about and who's taken part in it and stuff?
Yeah, so actually I've been editor a few times. I was editor of a poetry series called First Cut at Close to the Bone Press, which is about 15 books, and we did a series of one author, one chapbook of poetry, 15 in total. My first poetry book, Poems for Ghosts in Empty Tenement Windows, I Thought I Saw Once, long title, was one of the series. So that was my first attempt at editing. And then I'm also the editor at Punk Noir magazine, which is like an arts and literature magazine. You can find it on Twitter. And then, of course, the Gone anthology, which is a crime anthology that I just recently put out. It's got 30 stories by 30 amazingly talented writers. All of the stories are connected to the word gone, or they have the theme of gone. I'm just someone, you know, I love books, I love reading, and I don't just want to be the writer on the scene who is take. I believe that if you're on, if you're in the writing scene, you should be trying to, you know, raise other writers up. You should be trying to put money in other writers' pockets. You should be looking to support other people as much as possible. And, you know, being an editor, and I feel is one of the best ways that you can, you know, showcase other writers. When I was 18, no one I knew in my real life wrote, no one I knew read. And then I wrote a story, and I found a writer called Laura Hurd. She's a Scottish writer. And she had like a website which she received some stories, and the stories that she liked, she put up on the website. And that kind of changed my life, because she was the first person to actually email me back and be like, Steve, I really loved this. And as an 18-year-old guy who had just written my first short story, it meant a huge amount. And I never forgot that. You know, I'm 39 now. And I think, you know, if you can give someone that hope, you can really change their life. So that's what I kind of want to do as well. I want to boost people up as much as possible. You know? Yeah. It's the Gone anthology, yeah. So get the Gone anthology, guys. Sorry. Fine.
No, I agree. I want to jump in there because Joanne says I love these comments about supporting writers, and that's what this show and the writing community has been all about for us, and completely agree with you on that. And it's amazing to have people that could have never happened to you, and you may never have picked that pen up again. You know, fate goes a long way, and these little things can really make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
A couple of minutes, guys. Send in your questions for Steve, for us, both Chris's, for all of us together, or about anything you want within reason. And Chris, we haven't done staple questions last week. Do you want to put some in there? Should we do it again? Should we get it back?
I mean, it's been a long time, man. I can't remember a lot of staple questions. But yeah, you can do.
Yeah, we have seen your questions, guys. Don't worry, we'll get to them. Okay, Steve. So if you could take a fictional character from the world of fiction, obviously, whether it's in literacy on TV, on film, what character would you take out for the day? Or even if you wanted to chuck one in the book or take out for the day, what character would you take?
Oh, they got to be fictional.
Well,
okay. Hold on. Let me see. God, that's such a difficult question.
It is quite a difficult one on the spot. I apologize.
Okay.
They don't have to be fictional if that helps.
It's Maeve. It's Maeve from Will Carver's Psychopaths Anonymous.
Nice.
Maeve, yeah, I think she'd be a lot of fun. That kind of how do I say it? Psychopath woman, yeah.
Yeah. A dangerous afternoon,
yeah. I think that would be I would be able to write lots of poetry about that meeting.
I'm sure you could, if you had fingers left, that is.
Yeah.
If you could change the ending to anything, again, fictional, what ending are you going to change and why?
Oh, God, these are so tough. Fictional ending to something. Okay, let me see. I think Richard Yates' Revolution Road. I'd make it less depressing, and the couple have a happier ending, perhaps.
That's a good one.
But I like the traumatic endings. You know, like one of the first endings was of Mice and Men. The ending of that when I was like 16, studying that in high school, blew me away. You know, that was one of the reasons why I thought, I really want to start writing like that.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I love that. I had some questions, Chris, that I wrote down that I thought these are great questions, and I'm just looking for my notes.
Have you lost them? All right, well, keep looking, because I have got some from the audience, so I'll ask them. Steve, do you prefer? This is from Anya. Thank you. Structured or unstructured forms of poetry?
Definitely unstructured. Of course, if you want to write structured, but I feel like you should approach poetry with your own forms, whichever structure that you want to work with. You know, if you want to do it in sets of 2 stanzas or sets of 3 stanzas, you know, it doesn't have to be a sonnet. You don't have to force yourself. The same with haiku. So I prefer formless poetry. I'm not really a fan of. I like the occasional sonnet, but I think it's better to just try to get your own way down. Make it your own. Write a poem. Make it your own. Don't bother following in anyone else's footsteps, or you have to follow this set of stanzas or whatever. You know, do it however you want, and definitely never ever rhyme.
Never rhyme.
No. Like if I find a poetry that's rhyming, I just can't read it. I stop.
Wow. See, I don't read poetry, and I'm quite naive in that world where I thought poetry kind of did rhyme.
Yes, maybe in the 18th century or 19th century, but I think now it's like that's how I started. Like when I was trying to be a rapper. But of course, I think if you can do some rhyming is okay if you're doing it for a reason, but stay away from rhyming. Well, you know, it's not a Hallmark card.
Here we go, Chris. I think our next Chris versus Chris challenge has got to be a poem off, right?
Yes,
yes.
I mean,
poem off. I've got a great teacher in Steve, so I'm
you
sure
can't use him for that. That's cheating.
Yeah, but I've read his poetry, mate. So
I'll just read that as well. It's fine.
I'll be the judge.
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll
there you
hold
go.
you to that because Chris is very upset that he's losing in the poll last week. But there you go.
Yeah, because your biggest selling point was a smear.
Okay. So you have to write 5 lines, right? A 5-line poem, and it's got to be 4 lines, and then final line, the 5th line has to be like a hook, a real nice knockout, something
okay.
real powerful. 4
And
lines only.
How long have we got for this, Steve?
How long do you need?
A while.
Well, I think.
Have we got a week, 2 weeks, couple of weeks?
Yeah. I'll say 2 weeks. 2 weeks is all right.
Okay, there you go. 2 weeks,
2
guys.
weeks. What we'll
You've
do
heard
with that, Steve, because obviously we don't want you up at 5 a.m. again. What we'll do is we'll send you the poems individually, and then you could just do a quick video for us about
anonymously.
Yeah,
we'll send them to. Yeah, we'll send it.
Not just that. I'll publish them.
anonymously, can we?
I'll publish them on my magazine. I'll publish them
No.
on my magazine. So the winner and the runner-up will both have their first published poem at Punk Noir magazine.
Wow.
There we go.
So there you go.
So yeah, we'll send our poems to him. 2-week deadline. You got to send your poem in. Steve can record a little video if he wants to, and then we can play it on the show.
He could publicly shame one of the Chris's for losing the challenge as well.
Oh no! I won't.
I mean, if
you try hard,
I think that might end me. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, I've got a couple of more questions. Did you find yours?
No, I didn't. I've got some banging questions, but I don't know where they are.
Okay, let me crack on with these then because we're running out of time. Joanne Paulson, thank you for your question. It says a little vague, but I'm trying to write poetry yourself. What questions can I ask myself to determine if it's any damn good?
I think this is a writing community, right? So I think try to get it published. I think there are hundreds of magazines, and I think that's the only way you're going to know. Or, of course, what you write, what I write sometimes, you can write 500 poems. I think I've written 500 poems and only half have been published or something like that, right? So I think write as much as possible and submit your stuff as much as possible and keep learning, it's gradual. It takes a long time to find your voice or to find your form or your style, and think of the indie scene as somewhere to cut your teeth. It's the same for if you're writing short stories. The independent scene where you've got independent magazines is really, the school of hard knocks, but it's the best school, I think.
Okay. And we'll have one more from you guys, and then what we'll do is we'll see about where we can find these great books. And he's got a great question. Who would win, Godzilla or a monster-sized T-Rex in a battle? A monster-sized T-Rex?
I think they're the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think Godzilla would win because T-Rex arms just too small, right?
Well, actually, Joanne replied to that thinking it was a question for her, but it wasn't. It said T-Rex hands down. If he can reach Godzilla, of course, he has little arms. So that would be a battle. I mean, cool. I
have got my questions, Chris.
Oh, go on then.
Well, I've got some of them, so we've got time for a few of them. One of them is, can you remember your earliest childhood memory? And if so, what was it?
I think I was about my earliest childhood memory is not a nice one.
Sorry about that.
Oh, basically, I fell over. There was a paddling pool in the front garden, and I was running on the concrete, and I slipped over and banged my head. There you go.
Yeah. My next one, I don't think you're gonna like because you're not a big fan of technology and you don't like gimmicks, so you won't like this one. But can you just tell us about your book, just using emojis?
How is he going to do that?
Well, I mean, he could say which emojis he would use, or you could type them in.
I guess it would be the skull emoji with the green water pistol next to its head.
Nice.
Yeah,
I like that.
Good.
Yeah.
That'd be a great cover as well. Like
just that, yeah.
Yeah, bang. Next week, we'll cover the Chris versus Chris challenge. That's going to appear.
Or the shit eaters would be like the crap emoji.
Yeah, definitely. And the yummy tongue thing. Steve, one more question from us, and that is, if when you're looking back on your career many years down the line, what would success look like for you?
Oh wow. This is going to sound really corny, but okay, there's two. There's the dream, which would be I just want to get one book published with one of the top 5 or a big publisher. And success, I think, is for me, I can go into any bookshop in the world and get my book. Nice. That would be success. Success number 2, which is more realistic, is kind of what I've got now, which is a lot of great friends that I've made in the community. And, I've got my books, and I've got people who email me and tell me, I really liked this poem, or I really loved your novel so much. That really means a lot to me, a huge amount. Yeah. So there's, the dream, and then there's the real success, I think.
Brilliant. And finally, where can people go and find your latest book? And I would say about you, but I don't think you've got a website, and I didn't find it, if that's the case.
Just find me on Twitter, and okay. I think you'll find me everywhere else from there. And my novels are actually free at the moment. The Gone anthology came out, I think, on Tuesday, the 15th of November. And because of that, I've made my free books, Always a Dead, Say Goodbye When I'm Gone, and I'll Pray When I'm Dying. My free books are free on Amazon, and they're quite dark. So if you're not a fan of quite dark prose, maybe that's not the best for you. The same with my poetry, is quite dark, but currently free on Amazon.
Well,
zero pence.
Yeah, certainly picking those up for inspiration for our challenge, but also for that story you mentioned earlier on. Very excited to look into that. Steve, thank you so much for joining us and taking your time, getting up super early in the morning to come and speak with us. It's been an
absolute
pleasure.
What time is it now? 6:07.
Oh, dear God. Are you going back to bed? Have you got a busy day?
I am. I'm going back to bed.
Oh, I feel so bad that you actually got up for us in the middle of the morning.
No, it was cool. No, you guys was ace. So I'm really happy that we did this, and I appreciate everyone watching. If you're watching this, I really appreciate you for spending your Friday night watching me.
Brilliant. Yeah, and just from me, obviously, I can't speak highly enough of Steve's work. His poetry is amazing. His prose is amazing. I think it's a crime, to be honest, that your books are free at the moment. But, when somebody watches this, because people watch the shows years down the line as well. So if you're watching it and they're not free at the moment, you definitely still need to pick them up, because they're some of the best stories that you're going to read. So please definitely pick Steve's work up and look forward to what he's got coming in the future, because I know I definitely am.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, thank you from us. Take care of yourselves. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.